Said the unicorn to his true love's eyes. Recently purchased this house and all the others hit the road. In the interest of humanity, we found a better place for you to go. Go home, go home. Oh, no, this I can't believe. Oh, Mary, they're asking us to leave. And I told them we could pay double the rent.
I'd written a story, from having done these introduction stories, which went on the back of the live album. And it was about a woman who began sort of stripping in a tube train and taking off her clothes. Anyway, eventually she strips herself down and all that's left is this sort of tube of light. And it was something that caught William Friedkin's fancy, because he was Mr. Hot and Happening in Hollywood at the time, because he'd just done Exorcist. And he wanted to use that power to try and reinvent Hollywood and bring in a whole new team of people. And he invited me in as an ideas person, to brainstorm and come up with different concepts in different areas. He'd actually approached Tangerine Dream to do the music. And there was a guy called Philippe Drouillet, who's from Heavy Metal magazine, who was an animated designer that he wanted to work on some of the visuals. And to me, it was a very exciting opportunity. Not because it was Hollywood so much, but because I love ideas, I love brainstorming with smart people, and that was suddenly going to be given a vehicle and given a chance to come to life. So I really wanted to do it.
I don't know why it seems so where my country lies. Said the unicorn to his true love's eyes.
One of the aims of the record was to sort of look at Englishness in a different way, and therefore this title, Selling England by the Pound, seemed to be a good title for the album. So I made my recommendation.
Her merchandise, he traded in his prize.
Dancing with the Moon at Night was this attempt to sort of mix some traditional folk elements with more contemporary band arrangements, and I think even in the color of the voice I was using at the time, it was folk influence.
I think Dancing with the Moon at Night has got a lot of great moments on it. And when it starts out, you really don't know where the song's going to go, do you? And there was this da-da-da-da-dum-bum-bum, which Pete wrote on piano, and mainly becomes a guitar figure throughout the song. Again, it's someone else's melody interpreted on guitar in two different ways. And there's that lovely bit at the end that we used to call Disney, which they started using for some reason on gardening programs these days. Shot of a gnome, and there's this tinkling 12 string saying, that's Mike's bit there, this sort of repeated chord pattern. But we all operated with rock instruments, but not like a rock group. We all sort of faded ourselves in very, very gently, and we're all being very pastoral.
Yeah, I think there was a growing sense of confidence, and also with that particular track, which I started off writing, I was trying to get a folk reference and sort of, if you like, protect and preserve some of the Englishness. So it was in the opening part particularly trying to capture something that was had more references to Henry VIII than it did to American soul music. And then with the lyric, it was in a sense about the commercialization of English culture.
The whole album's kind of mad, really. And it's surreal. Right from the moment where it starts off, where Pete's singing unaccompanied.
Cried the uniform to his true love's eyes. It lies with me, cried the Queen of Maybe, for her merchandise he traded in his prize.
The influence for that was the Labour Party manifesto at the time, which was selling England by the pound. And, it was the references are so scattered within that one album and everything, including the album cover painted by a lady called Betty Swanwick, who just died recently. There was something about the whole kind of package that always makes me smile.
Selling England by the pound. Citizens of hope and glory, time goes by, it's the time of your life. Easy now, sit you down, chewing through their wimpy dreams. They eat without a sound, digesting England by the...
As far as I remember, Selling England was a relatively happy, calm period in the band's history.
this emphasis on writing songs, and I hadn't really written any songs for the album at that point. There were things that were going on in my private life that made it almost impossible to do that. And so really I just had lots of guitar licks, and I used them all on the album. That was the thing. And in some ways that was perfect. It meant that the album took on a more fusion sort of feel, and it was a little bit closer to Mahavishnu Orchestra. There was some tapping, there was some sticking it through a Leslie cabinet, there was that influence. It was a little bit Beatley, it was a little bit that, but it was still very English. And so I had a great time just being the guitarist, not wondering about, not trying to be a songwriter. I think I only come up with one thing as a song, which was After the Ordeal, which started out as this electric thing. I think it plainly didn't work as an electric melody. No one could make it swing. Ended up being this kind of acoustic thing that had an electric bit on the end. But I remember doing this in Chessington. We were in this house in Chessington, and as ever, it was eccentric as ever, I think. For some reason, we were in the living room of a house, and of course it wasn't soundproof, and of course neighbours started to complain, and but nonetheless, the fact that it was slightly out of town, it was slightly quirky, it was slightly strange, it had that homegrown feel about it.
There's a fat old lady outside the saloon, paying out the credit card.
The sense of humour in Genesis was extremely important, particularly to me, and I think Phil in some ways, but the tracks Willow Farm and Supper's Ready and Harold the Barrel, I think we're trying to follow a tradition of English absurdist humour. With I Know What I Like, too, there was this sense, again, of looking at this sort of repression in the English psyche. And in the line, me, I'm just a lawnmower, there's a sense of this guy grabbing hold of this lawnmower and mowing the hell out of the grass.
There's always been Ethel. Chicken, wake up, we got to tidy your room now.
Although it may have looked as if, there was more of a pop sensibility on this record, I think sort of Know What I Like was in part an accident. Often when we tried to chase things, we failed miserably. And I think we got to learn really that when we were ourselves and allowed things to happen, that we seemed to have more success and resonance with things. I never really loved the chorus, which, of course I like my sections, but I think, that was one of Tony's melody on the da 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 da. And after a while, I got very bored of it. But it was fun playing the sort of jerkier and jumpier melodies of the verse, and doing that with Phil, and then getting into this more floaty, simple chorus line.
When the sun beats down and I lay on the bench, thinking harmonies in the time. There's always been Ethel. Take a wake up, you got to tidy your room now. Then Mr. Lewis.
The band consolidated their reputation with the release of the lyrical album Selling England by the Pound. A single from the album, I Know What I Like, reached number 17 in the charts, and at last Genesis seemed to be balancing creative innovation and commercial success.
It's 1 o'clock, time for lunch. Fandy-damny day. When the sun beats down and I lie on the bench, I can always hear them talk. There's always been Ethel. Take a wake up, you got to tidy your room now. Then Mr. Lewis, It's any time that he was out on his own. Over the garden wall, two little lovebirds, keeping no one blink sharp. I know.
From work, our Juliet clears her.
First the Fifth was, well, obviously it's a kind of like a very strong sort of keyboard moment from the early years, and the way the guitar solo evolved is quite interesting, really, because I'd written, say, the three bits, and the second bit I'd written was just really a flute and piano melody, and I'd just seen it as that. And we were playing it, well, we played it a few times, it sounded really nice. And then one time Steve said, started playing it, and he started playing it sort of like this, and I thought, oh, great, and I started to put the mellotron in, big chords like this. It was almost like a joke. We were kind of doing it sort of like a la King Crimson, is how we saw it, just to make this overblown thing. And I thought, actually, that's really good, this. So we then sort of, so for the reprise of that melody, when it came in the second half of the song, we said, well, let's do it this big way and see how it works. And it worked really well. And it gave a chance for Steve to actually do a sort of proper guitar solo.
Tony's melody, which I tried to interpret in a kind of slightly sort of Middle Eastern sort of way. I was bending all the notes, and I remember one or two people said, "Oh, it sounds a little bit Indian, almost like a sitar," and there was a note that I was able to sustain that would work 9 times out of 10 at the top. You do a high F sharp, and just with proximity to the speaker cabinets, it fed back. So it sounded like I had perfect sustain on every note. I didn't, but I was able to fade in the notes on the beginning of it and sort of wait for it, coast over a sort of atmospheric section, and then play this melody, which I think, although it was written as a piano melody originally, it became a flute melody, and then it became this guitar melody, and it's kind of become Genesis' most well-known guitar solo. So yeah, I was allowed to play forever, it seems, this great long guitar solo in the middle of something written by Tony.
Steve, I think, was starting to really sort of find his feet a bit more as a player live and everything. I mean, obviously he always contributed, a lot of Genesis music obviously required sort of guitar, sort of acoustic guitar picking and stuff, where people notice it less, I think. People tend to notice lead playing a little bit more, and I suppose on this it was more of a genuine guitar solo. Some of the others are a bit tricksy, he was kind of thinking very hard about every note he played, and so it doesn't sort of soar in quite the way that this does, where I think he allowed himself to actually have a bit more freedom, with it. Particularly before the main melody starts, just some really nice little phrases and stuff, so it sounds more like a real guitarist.
I thought the cover was absolutely brilliant. Betty Swanwick, the fact that she'd done that picture, she was a member of the Royal Academy, and I think it was the front cover of their catalogue advertising the summer exhibition.
She seemed to have a good combination of Englishness and yet unraveling or exposing the underbelly. And I went down to see her, and then Tony and Margaret came down, and I think I went the first time on my own, but then they came down together, and she was a wonderful character, and she had a parrot, and she kept on talking to the parrot in the middle of the conversation. You weren't quite sure if you were being addressed or the parrot.
We had tea on her lawn, but what was great was she just put the table was on the lawn like that, and she put sort of the tea on that, and it was everything was sort of sliding down the thing, very strange. And the whole time we were there was this parrot that sat on Peter's shoulder, sort of nibbling his collar. It was kind of a somewhat surreal moment. Anyhow, she was an old, reasonably old lady. Anyhow, she said she'd love to do it, but she couldn't do anything from scratch in a month, which is what we needed, So we said, well, can you modify the picture that you've got, which is what she did. She just took the picture she'd had and she added a lawnmower to it so that it fitted with the lyrics to I Know What I Like, and put these people behind the things. And it worked really well. And I mean, in many ways, it's the best piece of art we've ever had on the front cover. Whether it's the best cover, I don't know, but it's the best piece of art we've ever cover.
So Betty Swanwick was a wonderful woman. She was a little bit like Miss Marple or an Agatha Christie character, full of life, very smart and mischievous.
She was a great old lady, and sort of nice seeing someone from the other world, not just the music world, someone in the art world who was up for sort of trying something.
For me, I mean, the cover was a great cover, the Betty Swanwick cover. That showed that there had been a change of sorts, and from that kind of very almost schoolboy graphic stuff, which was Foxtrot and Nursery Crime. In its way, it was done. I kind of felt it was a little schoolboyish. This was kind of something that was kind of elegant, the Betty Swanwick characters, and that stayed with us as well. I mean, it's a good album.
This album, I think we came together much more as players. I think it's the first, we sound convincing as players to a greater extent. In some ways, it was the most of the early albums. I suppose it's the most, it's a bit more technique in there and stuff. I always like to think the technique is just another sort of paintbrush in a way. It's something you can use, and it can be very effective at times. You should never take over. I think with some groups it sort of it takes over. It becomes the technique's the thing. You've got a guitarist who can play so fast that you can't stop doing it and everything. And we're very happy to sort of sit down. I'm just very happy to just sit down and hold down chords, which I do a lot of the time. I think that's, and then other times you would go mad, and that sort of. The contrast works, and you just use it, and it illustrates something you want to try and illustrate with the piece of music you're writing. And I think that's interesting. And as you said before, I think Steve's playing on this was really good. Particularly, obviously, the fifth solo was a sort of standout moment, I think, for his time with us.
I do look back on this one with fondness, although I think the others, I suspect Tony and Mike might have felt that the songs weren't as strong on it. I felt that it was an album that was big on atmosphere, very well arranged, very well played, lots of very interesting techniques, and everyone, playing and toying with things, where form was perhaps secondary to the spirit of it. So there's no other album in the world that any other band has made that sounds remotely like that. There is no album that Genesis made that sounds remotely like that. So I love it for its eccentricity, its invention, and I was thrilled with it, and I still am.
I always likened Selling England and Nursery Crime as sort of similar feeling albums in my mind. I think the good bits are good and the bad bits are a bit dodgy, but I think there's some strong bits there, definitely. And of course our first semi-hit single, almost. Who'd have thought?
There were things that I was less happy with than others, and obviously I think you follow your own bits and pieces further through than everybody else's, but it's. I think some of them could have been a bit sharper. I mean, for example, I mentioned the chorus of "Know What I Like," which didn't last for me as a pleasurable experience, even though it got us a hit. Most of our stuff took a few plays to sort of open up to a listener, but if they got it, it would stick around for quite a long time.
Between boys, there's no mystery. Once a man, I can see outrage. Once a
Hear mine while away the mornings since you gone. Too long have I lay alone, not knowing which way to turn. And there you are, quite sure that you were right, knowing full well that I'd be the first one to go down, and you'd be the one who was laughing, except when things weren't going your way. And
then the lady would say that she'd had enough, wandering around on her own. The day you left, well, I think you knew you'd not be back. Well, at least it would seem that way, because you never said goodbye. But when it comes round to you and me, I'm sure it will work out alright. And you'd be the one who was laughing and giving me something I don't need. And you know I'd always hold you and keep you warm. Oh, more fool me. Oh, but when it comes round to you and me, I ask myself, do I really believe in your love? Lies
The story is in a way it's like a Pilgrim's Progress, but on the streets of New York. So it's a spiritual journey into the soul, and but this was quite a tough world that is feeding the imagery and the starting point. So one of the influences on me was a film called El Topo by Alejandro Jodorowsky, who I invited later to work on the screenplay for The Lamb with me. And this was a rough, visceral, cowboy, spiritual film, and it was unique at the time. Had a really strong cult following, and that was the blend that I was trying to put together in a way that would allow more people to try and travel with me.
To promote the album The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, Gabriel devised an elaborate tour featuring numerous set pieces and costume changes. Tensions would rise between the band members as a result.
Gabriel kind of reaches his creative peak with Genesis, with The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, which is a very ambitious concept album about a Puerto Rican boy called Raul in this kind of mythic, fantastical version of New York, trying to find his identity.
top of the stairs, there's hundreds of people running around to all the doors. They try to find themselves an audience. Their productions need applause. The rich man stands in front of me, the poor man behind my back. They believe they can control the game, but the juggler holds another fight. I need someone to believe in, someone to trust.
works with his hands. He loves the nuance, you know he understands. Don't believe in me when you're out in the field, but down here I'm so alone in my fear, in everything that I keep, every single dark that I've walked through brings me back here again. I've got to find my own way. The priest and the magician singing all the chants that they have ever heard, and they're all calling out my name. Even academics searching for words. My father to the left of me, my mother to the right. Like everyone else, they're pointing, but nowhere feels quite right. And I need someone to believe in.
Peters, and I'm not. I mean, I have to be honest, and I say that I think the actual story is the weakest thing about the album. I mean, I don't think the story is really very gripping. Some of the individual lyrics are wonderful, I think, but the totality just doesn't move me. It doesn't do anything for me really. It reads a bit like a sort of Kurt Vonnegut novel or something, you know, without perhaps quite as good imagery. And I just that's always stays with me really. It doesn't satisfy me in the way that some of the other albums do. I mean, the Supper's Ready concept was a much simpler thing, you know, good and evil, you know, but that worked great, I think. But this one, not so well.
Lies down on Broadway. It was a strange period, actually. I mean, the Lamb kind of started for me. I can remember driving into Headley Grange. I had Andy, my first wife, with me, and I had Jolie with me. And there was this kind of, it was a bit like going into a Dickens novel, you know, it was like this, windows broken and rats everywhere. There were rats everywhere. Bad Company had used it, and Zeppelin had used it, and they'd recorded the When the Levee Breaks album there. But no one had cleaned up. It was really odd. I mean, this poor woman that owned the house, I don't think she knew what she was letting herself in for. But literally there were rats everywhere. So you'd walk in and you'd be walking down the corridor and 2 or 3 rats would walk past you. They wouldn't scurry away. They just walk past you and stop and look at you. So, yeah, got a problem? You know. And then in the back garden, there was these vines, you know, up the back wall, and you'd see this constant scurry of activity. And I was bringing a daughter into this, you know, where we were going to stay the night. I mean, at night when you went to bed, you could hear this scurrying around it. I mean, the place never slept. So, first of all, we had to clear up, but we never got rid of the rats. I mean, they were always there. And it was kind of weird time.
I remember talking to Robert Plant about this. They worked in the same place. Zepp had worked at Headley Grange. And he said, you know, I'm convinced that place was haunted. I said, me too. I heard the sounds at night. I couldn't get off to sleep. That place was weird.
They were composing The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, the climax of the band's progression from art rock to prog rock. Though it's now regarded as a classic, the press had grown wary of concept albums. The Lamb caught the backlash even from within the band itself.
Some of the costumes, I think, because there's Slipper Man, who is supposed to be sort of nastily contorted by sort of, you know, for all sorts of reasons. There's sort of great growths all over it and everything like that. It looked great, you know, but the music was starting to become secondary, and I think that we realised we'd gone too far at that point, you know.
No, the Slipper Man was in some respects, the last straw.
watching the songs I love you. Don't you walk with a ball.
I got sunshine in my stomach, like I've just rocked my Get me out of this game.
I think when we started writing, and we seemed to have quite a lot of ideas on the Lamb, we thought it would be the idea of making it a double album concept would be adventurous and would be quite a nice thing to try and do, you know. We had no idea what the concept was going to be or anything, but we felt that the audience our audience would be able to take it, you know. And so we found it quite an exciting idea of things to do. And then obviously we had to set about and think about what was the concept going to be about. And I think at this point, Peter sort of had an idea, and he seemed quite keen to do all the lyrics, which was something which we'd never done before. The lyrics have been very much split throughout the group prior to this time. And we weren't really in favour of this, you know. I mean, to be honest, I think the rest of us, because it felt that it would give the album a one-dimensional quality. And I think lyrically, I mean, for me, it does have that for that reason. And but anyhow, I think, you know, perhaps the relationships in the group was getting a little bit more, you know, wasn't quite as easy as it once had been. Probably because Peter was being thrust out as the star in a way, you know, media would only concentrate on Peter really, which was strange in a group that was sort of as democratic as we were in a way, you know, in the way everything came with music and everything was done. So that was a little bit difficult for us, I think. And obviously during the making of, while we were actually writing this album, Peter actually got an offer to do this film script for William Friedkin, and he decided he was going to do it and went off. And that was in the middle of the writing.
So we took over the living room to write, and there was another room with a piano, which I guess during the first few weeks of this, there must have been discussions, which I was there for, but I don't remember much, about who wrote the lyrics. You know, it was one story, okay. One story, one lyric writer, which I guess in theory is the way to go. But so what I remember mostly about the Lamb was the four of us in the big room, jamming and writing and recording on my Nakamichi, everything. And in the other room, Peter writing lyrics to the things that were already there. Which means that, I mean, obviously we did play some stuff all together, but it was like him and us, it seemed. You know, my shutter went off at those moments, that's what I remember.
Grows richer. He knows he must be near. He finds a long passageway lit by chandelier.
To try and keep everybody happy, you know, there would be parts of it where, you know, we'd be discussing lyrics and throwing some of the words around for different bits. And so the Lamia, which was so Tony's musical piece, or supernatural anaesthetist, was Steve had brought in. So then, you know, they would discuss some of the lyrical stuff with me because they'd sort of got the writer's ticket. But, you know, I was pretty anal about hanging on to some lyrical flow through and, you know, being able to put a stamp on it. I really wanted a sort of tougher edge to this record than we'd had previously. And I didn't think there was anyone else in the band that was going to deliver that.
Struck by beauty, gripped in fright. 3 vermilion snakes of female face, the smallest motion. He finds a long passageway lit by chandelier. Each step he takes the path you take, digesting every word the experts say. You're right in the song. time, still counting out time. I got the finger on the button, don't say nothing, just lie there still and I get to turn on just fine. You're like this road, without you I would fall. And the land lies down on Broadway. Early morning Manhattan, ocean winds blow up the land.
There's all this big time stuff happening with long tours being planned way in the future. And I just felt I was getting to be part of a machine, and I also felt I was becoming a sort of stereotype, sort of rock star, or falling into wanting that ego gratification. And I didn't like myself, I didn't like the situation then, and I didn't feel free.
It wasn't just Gabriel's fellow musicians who were frustrated. He was realising that Genesis could not continue to function as the only vehicle for his ideas.
I had been contacted by William Friedkin, who'd just done The Exorcist, which was a hot film at that time, and really well-made film. And he had great ideas for sort of revolutionising Hollywood and bringing in whole new teams of people who'd never worked in film before. And he wanted me in to do to work on ideas, story ideas and visual ideas. And for me, that was really quite exciting. I mean, still to this day, something that I enjoy doing.
And of course, we dug our heels in and said, no, you either do that or you do this. Stupid, really. But we were too young and it was too early for people to have too many outside projects.
It was not just personal projects, but personal life that made Peter want to withdraw from the band he'd helped to found as a schoolboy.
It was the time of the birth of my first child, and there was a really rough birth, and the hospital didn't think she was going to make it, and she spent first month in an incubator. Now, to me, there was no question of priorities, living being and a record, and we were in the middle of making Lamb Lies Down, so I was spending a lot of time at the hospital, and I think well, Phil had a kid, but the others really weren't appreciative of all that family side of things, which they now are, and their lack of openness and of understanding, I think, of that situation for me was a deciding factor as well. We had our first child, Jill, who I was married to at the time. It was, you know, as it is for anyone really, it's suddenly the most important thing in your life by a long way. And we had a disastrous birth. We were all set for sort of natural birth, putting her on the breast. She had an infection which was given to her from an epidural needle, which wasn't clean. So she had a fever. Jill had the fever. Cord round her neck. Lungs full of gunk. Everything was going wrong. And we didn't think she was going to survive. They put her in an incubator, carried her away like a piece of chicken carcass wrapped up in silver paper. And they actually wouldn't let my wife see her because they thought it would be cruel for her to bond with the baby who wasn't going to make it through. Chances were so low. I mean, they wouldn't do that nowadays, but they thought they were being kind. That was then the center of everything. And the band, of course, were recording instead of somewhere reasonably close to London, where we were in St Mary's, Paddington, out in Wales. And I was making these sort of long pilgrimages beforehand, and then I would be based here. And then whenever things looked better, I'd try and zoom back to Wales for the recording. So this was something that the band, I think, would accept now, that they were not very understanding, and I just lost it in lots of ways because I felt, you know, this is so obviously more important than an album or anything else. This is life and death, and it's the center of my family. That's where I need to be. And there was a lot of resentment about that. So I think the seeds for the beginning of the end were sown at that point.
It was very difficult. My marriage was breaking up. It looked as if, you know, we only had half a singer. The level of commitment to the band seemed shaky at that point. So for me, it cast a pall on proceedings. And although I think it's a very inventive album, and it's got great moments on it, I still feel there was this sense of claustrophobia that accompanied it for me. The idea that we were still trying to employ the philosophy of everyone going away together and living together cheek by jowl, you know, but there were families, there were children. It really wasn't a healthy kind of environment for everybody.
I think I started to have some frustration of sort of not being part of the keyboard side of things, you know, and you know, I have very strong ideas on how things should sound and how you mix things together, and so I think there may have been some frustrations in that department. One of the several reasons why I left was because that I didn't feel able to control, or that I was in charge of my life, that, you know, I could just look on the calendar and see exactly where I was going to be 18 months from today, and I never liked that feeling.
I have to say that there's been sort of little rumours on and off throughout the years that because of my apparent, unhappiness at Pete's visuals, that I was either an instigator of him leaving, pleased that he left so I could sing. None of that is true. I love Peter to this day as if we've always been close. I played on his album. I played for him as his drummer for free because he couldn't afford a band at one point. We did gigs when he was routining the third album. I love the guy. I went to his wedding and you came to mine. We all get on great, but I've always felt very, very close to Pete. And I was very sad when he left, but we had to get on with it. And I didn't want to be the singer at all because I was the drummer. And by that point, I was a very good drummer. So why would I want to sing? We couldn't find anybody else. So if we couldn't find anybody else, that was the end of it. Or have someone that didn't really make the grade, So bit by bit, I ended up doing the singing. And but people always take the short story. They take the shortest route, and they think Phil's the singer. He's had a go at Pete. He wanted him out.
It's bullshit. Phil, yeah, some people think, that Phil was sort of chomping at the bit, waiting to get rid of me, and it wasn't like that at all. I think he loved being a drummer, and although I think was beginning to write songs and enjoy being a singer, for quite some time the band didn't consider him as the singer, and I don't think he really considered himself as the singer for Genesis. So that evolved slowly. It was clear to me that he could have a big career on his own, and I remember saying that to him and to the rest of the band at the time, and because, as I said, we would often be there hammering out our own things, which were sounding quite different from what the band was doing. It wasn't. I never had the feeling that the band wanted to get rid of me at any time, and I think because we started the tour for the Lamb, and that got great reactions, people were hoping that things would all heal, and then we got to the Midwest of America, and it just got too much for me, and I just knew that I was drowning and had to head up for air. They then sort of persuaded me to stay on and finish doing a tour, which would take us till middle of 75, and I guess it was somewhere around summer, autumn 74 when I decided to quit, and that was very hard.
I think the band had just got too many sort of creative personalities in it, and somebody had to go, really. And Peter was the only one who could go, because the only one who really had an alternative career to go to.
It was definitely the right thing for me to have done, and clearly it was good for them because it sort of brought Phil out front and gave everyone a bit more space, I think. I always look upon that time as a healthy part of growing up.
stars, the biggest one of the night. Counting out the time. I'm gonna be wrong, but don't say nothing. Just lie still and I'll get to turn on the smile. Lies down.
Kinds of things come back when you say Lamb Lies Down Broadway. We did about 98 shows with it all the way across the world. We went to America before the double album had come out. Suicide, we played the whole thing to an audience of people who thought, what the hell's going on? Because Peter was dressing up in extraordinary costumes at this point.
I cringe at certain places now when I look back at it. Again, atmospheres were caught in some of the tracks.
Something's changed, that's not your face, it's mine.
We had these sort of slides behind us. We had three, a triple screen system of slides, which are about 1,000 slides, and they changed throughout the show. We did about 100 shows of Lamb Lies Down, and I'd say it probably only all worked. Well, it never all worked, actually. It came close to all working on about 4 or 5 occasions, and they were great. Unfortunately, every other night there was always something wrong.
At the end of The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, we used to have a little flash, and Peter used to appear one side of the stage, because the whole thing's about a split personality going. So Peter was on one side, and the dummy, dressed the same as Peter, was the other side. And so there was this flash, and the strobe would start, and you weren't quite sure which one was real, Anyway, it was the first gig in Europe, and the mixture of flash powder per ratio to explosion was the first time this guy had done it. And he got too much bang and not enough flash. And the most deafening explosion. We just stopped playing. We just looked around at each other, and the audience was stunned. This guy poked his head around the curtain and said, "Sorry!" And I shouted out, "You're fired!"
End of that tour, suddenly the lights go up and there's Peter on one stage singing, and you pan to the other side of the stage and there's a completely naked, big fat roadie.
Jeff Banks, wasn't it?
He's still with us now.
I think it kind of culminated, though, for me personally, in the Slipperman costume, though, because at that point, I was very much, a musician in this band, and and this was starting to piss me off a bit, because Peter wasn't able to get a microphone close enough to his mouth half the time in that costume to actually do what he was supposed to be doing, which was singing,
It was a bit strange to be carrying on doing gigs knowing the singer was leaving. I must admit, it was a bit strange. Must have been strange.
His last gig with the band was in Besançon, in France. And it was supposed to be Toulouse, but because of lack of interest, there was no tickets had been sold. So the concert was cancelled, and we were backstage at the dressing room in Toulouse, in Besançon, and someone said, "We're not playing tomorrow night, so this is the last night." And it was terribly anticlimactic, because we all built up to this last night with Peter, that it was going to be a great show, and then suddenly this was going to be the last night, and we weren't prepared for it. So he played the last post on the oboe, and we went on stage and did the Lamb. Extraordinary, really.
And the light dies down, down, down on Broadway.
A flower? You go down to Willow Farm to look for butterflies, butterflies, butterflies. Open your eyes, it's full of surprise. Everyone rises and looks in the rocks.